Well, I've removed the aluminum foil, the iron wire that connected the core of the transformers together into the circuit, and the connection that the aluminum foil had with the circuit, and in their place. Oh, and I also got rid of the little itty-bitty plastic straw representing the capacitor for safe sleeping, by the bionic version of replacing the neon bulb and resistor. And I took those 4 connections and I made 4 plates of a stacked capacitor, which is what's in the box. And there's the other toroid over there. And I had to figure out a peculiar arrangement among the 4 plates, so I'm going to try to describe them to you using very shabby schematics. So basically what I figured out was, of course the neon bulb is in the wrong position up here. It has to be over here, the top, the line, the lead that goes to the top here. Anyway, so it has to be moved in. And then there's the resistor, and the resistor faces the earth in case, a lightning strikes, so the resistor is there to save the neon bulb from being blown to bits. In case there's a surge in the earth. So the resistor end connects to the captor ground, and the aluminum foil representing the 4 grounding rods, that was another plate. So this is one plate, and the resistor was a plate, the captor ground was a plate, that are connected together. 2 plates, increased surface area, which makes sense because the captor ground is increased surface area by comparison to the aluminum foil. Sort of. Makes sense. And the neon bulb was another plate. That's the way I had it arranged. Anywho, so I figured out, here's here's a neon bulb, and it was going to be, and then I had to figure out what my labels on my box were, because I already had labels on the 4 cords. I took out the floating plate because I had 5 plates, so now I only have 4 plates in there. So, but I still have the old labels on the wires, so I have to use them. So these have no reference to what they used to go to in my previous use of the capacitor. So A prime, it represents the neon bulb plate, and big A is its opposite plate, and the little a is the aluminum foil plate, and the big A prime is the captor ground, the 56 grounding rods, as opposed to the aluminum foil, which was the 4 grounding rods. So then I have the neon bulb connected to the 2 outermost plates, because, as I recall, when I measured my 5-plate system, the further the 2 plate references were apart, the less voltage there was between them, and the 2 most inner ones had the greatest voltage difference between them. So since I want the grounding rods to predominate and have a lot of voltage difference to drive the electric keeper in here, I'm going to want them in the middle. So I put them in the middle here, and the neon bulb resistor pair I put on the outside. But the 2 big A's connect together. They connect together. So I have a very weird arrangement in here. So this is, I'll back up. This is my this is my schematic, the way I drew it straight from here, what I was doing. And I took out the 2 balancing loads, 1 for each toroid, because I only have 1 now, and that's the true load over here. So, and I took out the wire that connects the 2 cores of the transformers together to the captor loop, and I took out the aluminum foil connection because the aluminum foil is not there anymore. They went to this hub here. So now, if we just focus on this hub, because that's where all the plates are. So let's see. Little a prime was where the neon bulb was, which went to one of the voltage in. That's one plate. The next plate is, oh, this one, the captor ground. The captor ground, A prime. And then comes the aluminum foil plate, the 4 grounding rods plate. Wait a minute, that doesn't... Yeah, no, right. Because the captor ground and the 4 grounding rods are adjacent to each other in the center. And then, what's the last one? The resistor, I push all the way out, and it comes to here. And its connection eventually goes to this hub here. And the 2 big A's are connected together. So that's what I have. So let's see if I have this. So let's see. Little A was where the neon bulb used to be. Let's see if I can find where I put it. Ah, here it is. So here's the upper. I better back up. Here's the upper hub that would have gone to the neon bulb, the shunt or the short that I brought down from up here down to the line, this other line here that goes to the top of the toroids. So that's what this is, and that goes to the little A connector that goes into the box. So that part's right. Let's see, the next one is the big A prime that comes from the captor group, or captor ground. That's the next plate. So let's see, captor ground, where are you? Oh, here we go. Big A prime and big A are hooked together, so the 2 plates are hooked together, and that goes, oh, here we go, to the left line that comes from my captor loop. Kind of tiny captor loop down there because it's 18 gauge. So that part's right. And then the last plate is the resistor, which is big A. No. The resistor. Oh no, aluminum foil? Well, that's not the last, that's the third. Actually, the last plate was the big A, but that was connected together with the big A prime. So the third plate is the 4 grounding rods, the aluminum foil connection, and that's little A. Or was it little A prime? No, it's little A. Oh dear, dear, dear. See, I got things backwards. Yeah. Actually, I got my labels backwards. The neon bulb is little A, and the aluminum foil is little A prime. Whatever. Yeah, I had to swap my... Basically, I'm going to have to draw another schematic to show you. Anyway, trust me, this is right. Yeah, trust me. How about if I trust myself? Well, I'm going to have to review this. Let's see. Big A prime. Actually, I have to do it off camera. Okay. So enough of this video. Well, I redrew the circuit for that. Ideally should look like this. Now all I have to do is qualify to my satisfaction that this actually represents that. Because this is the way that we're more or less familiar with the circuit, not the way that I usually have been drawing it straight from there. I had an interesting phenomenon when I turned on my little SOTA Instruments zapper. The load, my LEDs flashed, and then they went out within about 2 or 3 seconds, and I changed the batteries and they haven't restarted. So what's going on there? I don't know. That's pretty weird. Anyway, so let's zoom in here and get an idea of what's going on. So, to be a little bit more precise, let's zoom out a little. There are really two sets of voltage in. There's the voltage in from plug number 1 and the voltage in from plug number 2 of the AC sine wave inverter of Clarence's successful replication. And plug number 1 supplies the voltage in for this here that goes to the 4 grounding rods. So earth ground, I'm calling this earth ground. And this is the 56 grounding rods that goes to the Capacitor loop. So this would be the neutral of plug number 1, and this top one is the line of plug number 1. Plug number 2 supplies the line of voltage in here and the neutral of voltage in here. Now I've put in the diodes pointing in to each of the toroids here. Here's the short, and here's the loop, the Capacitor loop, and here's the electric keeper. And so what would have been two sets of grounding rods, like 56 over here, let's say, and 4 over here, and the 4 actually is in the center of the 56. I placed a capacitor because that's what the earth is. It's a capacitor, although it has the additional anomaly that it's providing a magnetic field surrounding the dielectric of the earth that these two sets of rods are plugged into. And then he has the neon bulb with resistor, 100 kilo ohm resistor, coming out of, this would be the line of plug number 2. Well, that's my speculation anyway. I used to have it on the line of plug number 1, but then I shifted it to the line of plug number 2. And I think I'm more accurate this time based on his description, because he took away the schematics. In fact, I never found any schematics that explicitly defines where the neon bulb goes. So I've had to speculate. So my speculation now is the plug number 2 line as opposed to plug number 1. And then it goes to the Capacitor ground line above, up here usually, but this on this side is fine, just before it reaches the earth. So that's what I did, and then I crossed it out and put a capacitor in its place. So I have 2 capacitors, which is what I have in the box, but I have them combined in such a way, first of all, these 2 plates are linked together, which is what they are, doubling their surface area. And then I have what would have been the neon bulb side, and, that's down here. And then I have what would have been the aluminum foil or 4 grounding rod equivalent side that I used to have surrounding the toroids over here. So now all I have to do is make sure that this conforms to this. But this is more or less what his circuit looks like. And it's, without the 2 leads coming off of here that go to the smart, Xantrex battery charger, then to the battery, then all over here to the AC, pure AC sine wave inverter that feeds back in. I've eliminated that because that's extra icing, that's extra credit if you can do that to make this a self-runner. I just want to see if I can get this to operate the way it's described should be capable of operating. That's all I want to do. On a small scale, though, and in DC form. And without the use of grounding rods. So I thought, well, God, it can't be that hard. Well, when you've got the Earth as a huge dielectric, how can you do anything that can compare? Well, the idea missing is that the Earth is not just a huge dielectric, it's a magnetized huge dielectric, because the strength of the geomagnetism matters. And that would effectively shrink down the effective area required here for earth ground, the dielectrical area in here. Volume, the dielectrical volume in here. He's already determined they all have to be 3 feet apart from each other, every single rod, regardless of whether they're strung together within each set or the relationship between them. It's always 3 feet. So we've got a volume, and then we've got a distance already. We've got a volume that's not determined, and we've got a distance that is between the plates. And then we've got a magnetic field here, so actually we need another symbol in here to qualify this as a magnetic field. What kind of symbol would that be? I don't know. I just said Earth ground, which isn't good enough. So let's put a neo here. Where would we put it? Oh, it would cover the whole thing. Okay. So let's draw it this way and call this neo. Alright? Let's zoom in, it's easier. Alright, so we've got a capacitor with a neo across the dielectric, being shared by both plates. Because you're charging up the whole thing. You could put a neo, actually you could put a neo on both sides, attached to both plates. This is aluminum foil, so it probably won't have any attachment. I'll have to tape it. But I could tape a neo to one plate and a neo to the other plate to charge the dielectric between the two plates. So that's probably what I'll do. So I'll put another neo over here. Okay, so that's what I'll do. I just drew one here, but I'm going to put 2 on either side is actually what I'm going to do. So, the problem though is these are my 2 middle plates. Anyway, that's what I've done. I've linked together these 2, putting these 2 around these 2. So I'm not interleaving them, I'm putting them around because I'm expecting the voltage difference here to be less than the voltage difference here, which means these plates have to be closer together. But this way I'll have it in phase by putting these 2 surrounding these 2. May not be a good idea, you know, but... Oh, and then I also shorted out. I connected this right-hand plate with this right-hand plate. So I'm going to have to open up the box and put in some neomagnets. Yeah, I forgot about that. So I took them off the toroids. I took off the wire that connected the 2 toroids, and I took off the aluminum foil, because I'm just going to use capacitors and some neos to replace what I was trying to do over here, to replace the earth ground rods, the 60 earth ground rods that he uses in here. But this is the way it should be drawn to be more clear. But now all I have to do is verify that this accurately describes this mess of wires. And then go ahead and also open up the box and put in the neos inside the box. Maybe I'll videotape that when I open up the box, but first I want to verify that the circuit is accurate, the diagram, the schematic is accurate. The correction of neon bulb placement that I had to re-speculate is based on one particular post of Clarence at Energetic Forum, and I have 2 copies, or 2 shortcuts, one to the original, and in case he should delete it, one to the archival version at archive.org. And they're both off by 1 character, so I use the shortcut redirect service of isgood. That's https://is.gd/ and neon bulb is the shortcut to the archival version, and neon underscore bulb is the original. And so what he said in that quote was that the neon bulb has a very interesting behavior. It has a strike voltage of, I think he said 90 volts, and then it tapers off to 60, and then the flow-through or follow-through, the follow-through voltage is 0.2 volts with absolutely no amperage. And this tells me that it's kind of similar to a barbecue igniter, or a spark gap. A barbecue igniter would be an example of a spark gap that only happens once. It's not continual. And then it becomes a capacitor. And because no amperage flows once it's initiated the transference of spark, it no longer transfers it. And so it maintains the voltage that it's sent to the other side. It prevents it from coming back, so it's kind of like a diode at that point. And it only needs supply, 0.2 volts, to maintain that imbalance that it had initially sent over to the other side, the 90 volts plus. So I thought, gee, that's interesting. That shows definitely Barbosa and Lille is not a self-starter. And it takes a huge surge to get it started. And you send it over to the captor ground. You send it into the earth of 56 grounding rods, of all places, which, if it were sustained, would sustain your load. But you only do it once, in electrical terms, pretty fast, nanoseconds or something. But you don't pass anything further, and so it becomes a capacitor. That's why I thought to put a capacitor in place of the neon bulb, not only as a safety feature for sleeping at night, when it becomes a bionic circuit connected to an earthing bedsheet, but to implement the ideology, the improved speculation on my part, how to get rid of the grounding rods. So the behavior of the neon bulb is very important. So what's needed in this diagram that I don't have is a spark gap that's in parallel between little a here and the two big A's over here. They would charge up these two plates with a huge voltage and leave it there and immediately turn into a capacitor afterwards. In other words, the spark gap is a manual one, like a barbecue igniter. Happens once and doesn't happen again. So it would charge up what would have been the resistor here and the captor ground line here, counterpoised against what would have been the 4 grounding rods over on this side and the neon bulb over on this side. In other words, just this and just this. So this is it represents the 4 grounding rods here and the neon bulb over here. This represents the captor ground, which is connected to this, which would represent the resistor over here. But they're connected together, so I really don't care where I bring down and connect this at this point. So I just, for schematic convenience, I put it over here at the resistor when it really should go over here at the, this is the captor ground over here, because they're connected together, so whatever. So I have to verify now, this is improved version, verify now that all these connections are what I have. And what confuses the matter is that I've got 2 sets of little a's and big A's, both plain and prime, and I have a whole nother set over here regarding the 4 capacitor plates. And they're not this. They're 2 different sets of, so I got 8 symbols. Very confusing. But I've separated the voltages in, because that's the way it should be. The voltage in on plug number 1, that's up here and down here, surrounding the voltage in at plug number 2, that are the inner 2 inlets. This outer one is simply a voltage. There's no amperage supplied, because there's a break here between the 4 grounding rods and the 56. There's a dielectric of the earth in between. So there's no way for plug number 1 to deliver amperage. But because of the neon bulb, let's see, it is possible, it is possible to supply voltage, but only 0.2 volts. So that's all you're going to be able to light up over here is 0.2 volts. But now that I got a capacitor, I can't do that. So this thing, if this thing doesn't work at all, this thing just won't work at all. Actually, no, let me scratch that. Oh yeah, so the reason why I have this over here, this is reduced voltage, see, as comparison to this plate over here, which is raised voltage. So that's a little weird anomaly, but that's the way it's wired. So that's the way I arranged the plates in a stack, because the voltage over on this plate across to this one is only 0.2 volts, while the voltage across these two is much larger. And I imagine it has to be greater than 115 volts to be able to power this over here. In fact, I think Void, the guy who calls himself Void over at overunity.com, said there was something like 500 volts to run what eventually will be a 115 volt load, but the added amperage that came from those added volts somehow converted by what goes on in here, which I still don't understand. So there's going to be a difference in voltage across here as opposed to across here, and that's why I put the neon bulb on the other side, but now I have it connected together. Because why? Oh, because I have to, because they're connected together here. That's right. So this is going to be weird, because this is going to be, it's going to average out the voltage, isn't it? It's going to distribute it. So what would have been high here is going to be high here as well. What would have been low here is going to be high, and what would have been high here is going to be low. So we're going to have a difference in voltage between these two, which kind of makes sense, sort of. That's true. If you want a voltage difference, that's right. So I guess this is the right way to do it, because that's ultimately what we want. We want a voltage difference between these two. And also a voltage difference between these two, but to a lesser degree, but it's not... oh, it is, because this, A, is less than A prime. See? So this is the foregrounding rods. This is going to be a greater voltage. It is? They should be the same, actually. Oh, that's right. Even though this comes from plug number 1 neutral, and this comes from plug number 2 line, so this is the hot. So you got the hot over here and the neutral over here. So yeah, there should be a voltage difference between them. But along the lines of 115 volts, if this were being powered by a AC sine wave inverter over here with 2 plug outlets, 2 outlet plugs. I don't know. What can I say? This is just what I'm thinking through logically. Trying to take this and replace this with this, which may not be a good idea. But if I didn't do it, then what would be done differently? I'd have, instead of this A plate over here, I'd have a neon bulb connecting to this plate over here with a resistor in here, and these two plates would still be connected together, so I'd have 3 plates instead of 4. That's the only difference. If I put the neon bulb back, I'd have 3 plates instead of 4, and 3 look kind of weird, but you know, why bother if the neon bulb acts as a kind of plate once it's already performed its actions? So I'm going to have to draw in parallel here a spark gap to represent the barbecue igniter. That's what I'm going to have to do. Okay. Alright, so here's my barbecue igniter. And then here I've got my capacitors. So this is the only part I don't have in the circuit at the moment. That's in storage. And I also don't have my 2 sets of power, which are going to be DC, because that's all I have. I don't have 2 soda instruments that that run in phase with each other. But I do have two 3-volt battery packs. So I'm going to split off my power in connections so that I have two different sets independent of each other. And I guess I'll have to check the battery packs that they both well, yeah, they both work. Oh, I see. Measure the voltage coming out of each. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so now I have my new schematic, and now I can go ahead and find out if what I have actually complies with what I've drawn, minus the spark gap. That's the only thing I won't be able to actually have connected. I thought I'd get it in the schematic one more time. Scanning it never seems to work very well. I'll try scanning it and then making a image out of it, but here's the a view of it. Well, I separated the two power sources as the diagram specifies, that I revert to the strict interpretation of the schematic provided by Clarence. Plug 1 and plug 2 coming out of the sine wave inverter, the AC sine wave inverter. So those are the two leads, the hot leads, and those are the two neutrals of the two plugs, plug 2 and plug 1, and plug 1 and plug 2. So plug 2 are the inner ones, inner voltage in. So when I look at it, I see, well, gee, I shouldn't be surprised that the load doesn't light up, because I got a capacitor with absolutely no amperage flowing through, which makes me wonder, A, is this a correct substitution, or B, is it merely because I did not yet include the spark gap, which means I should temporarily short out, but see, that won't be the same thing, just to test out whether or not the load even lights up. Okay, so I should short out little a with either one of the big A's because they're joined together. Otherwise, everything else is the same. Alright, let me try that. Well, I tried shorting out little a with the two A's to deny the spark gap, but just put a line between them so that the power from P2 line can go to the load through the capacitor loop, making believe that it's the neutral, but nothing happened, and it doesn't surprise me because all of the resistance in this circuit is in the load, and there's none in the two toroids, even with the diodes in place, oddly enough. So nothing lit up, and that's the problem I had before, and I thought I should balance the situation and put an equal amount of resistance, in other words an LED, with each, in parallel with each toroid, and then that was nice, you know, play around, but it's not the circuit. So let's see, so because there's no resistance, and I did verify to my satisfaction at some point in the past that there is current going through the toroids, I just don't get to see it, because I don't get to light up the load over here because there's not enough, amperage to light it up, because it's all going through the toroids, the path of least resistance. So even if I short out, nothing happens, which shows that the system is designed to run on very high voltage, accumulating for the most part down below here in the area of the grounding rods, and also maintained by the neon bulb, because the neon bulb shoots it over initially to the other side of itself, to the capacitor ground, the 56 grounding rods, the capacitor ground side of the capacitor loop here, and then it leaves it there because then it cuts off the ability for that voltage to echo back to little a. So from A prime, big A prime, to little a. So in a sense, the neon bulb functions like a capacitor. So that tells me that the whole grounding system is a very high voltage field underground. That's what's been done, and it's safe because it's underground. But it's very high voltage. And to try to take it out of the ground, of course, is a very high voltage risk, for one thing. And for another thing, how do you deal with that if you're not accustomed to dealing with high voltage static charges as it is? So, but I haven't even delivered any high voltage charge to initiate the process. That's what's missing, and that would be the spark gap, or barbecue igniter, represented by the spark gap here in this diagram. So that's the only thing missing, and it's why I'm not getting any results. So, one thing though for certain is this is safe to sleep on without, for some reason the neon bulb really stressed me out big time. I may have a tumor in my brain, I don't know. I got headaches, I got a stroke condition in my left arm in which my left arm got ice cold and it hurt. Or stroke-like, pretty close. And it took a couple days to get over that. But only so long as I took out the neon bulb and didn't even have a connection there and put a capacitor in its place, and that's what I have. So I've represented the grounding, I've taken the grounding rods that I used to have represented by the iron because I thought it was a magnetic phenomenon. Now I understand it's an electrostatic phenomenon, and magnetism kind of is indicative, geomagnetism is indicative of an electrostatic field provided by the Earth. But we don't have electrostatic geomaps, we have magnetic geomaps. So you infer one from the other, and that's the trick to interpreting. What does it mean, a geomagnetic strength in your area? It means a strong electrostatic field in your area. And that's what's going to make all the difference in making sure that whatever the circuitry supplies, the initial burst of energy that the neon bulb supplies to the 56 grounding rods, doesn't go dissipate itself into the earth, but stays there in the rods, in the 56 rods. That's the whole point of having a strong magnetic field in your area, is to simply indicate that you have a strong electrostatic field, such that when you use the earth as a huge, safe, dielectrical bank to store your electrostatic energy into, it doesn't go and dissipate itself on you and leak out into the ground. So unlike Tesla's system, you're not trying to send energy into the earth. You're just using the earth as a very convenient, safe form of dielectrical storage of electrostatic energy. So you don't want it to leak out, though. And that's the catch. See, I don't know. I don't know if Tesla went to Colorado Springs because it was strong magnetic in that area, and he inferred strong electrostatics, and the same being said of the case of Wardenclyffe location. So I don't know. But that's what's happening here, is that the geomagnetism merely infers geoelectrostatics. And because that's what you want in the ground, so you don't lose what you put there from your circuit. So what I suspected all along, that the circuit is providing its own energy stored in the field of the grounding rods, was valid. It just was vague, and I didn't understand the particulars. It's truly an electrostatic driven device in which voltage potentials drives the amperage, which must be zipping around inside that gauge 4 electric keeper wire. Must be a very good reason why it's gauge 4, because it's got a ton of amperage zipping around in there, driven by the voltage difference potentials among the grounding rods. Why else would this thing be able to power a load? The Capacitor loop coming out of the electric keeper and going to the load. The Capacitor loop coming out of the electric keeper and going to the load. Why else? Because of all this voltage down here being used to to push the amperage around in this continuous loop without spending any amperage from here, because there's no amperage provided. It's just a dielectric field of dirt, 3 feet between rods, dryish dirt, so that there's no shorting going on between the rods. So what we really have is, and I haven't bothered to figure it out yet, is the surface area of 60 grounding rods, or 56 versus 4. I thought the mass was significant, and it probably is, because he said steel grounding rods, copper-plated work better. It's probably because it's taking advantage of the geomagnetism in the area, but that's just an added advantage. It shouldn't be discredited as just being insignificant. It is significant. But primarily it's an electrostatically oriented system, because he said if it rained, his field of rods was useless. He needed more rods. So it just appears to be a combination of factors, both magnetic and electrostatic, and the electrostatic can't be denied or overlooked. So the surface area of the grounding rods is significant. So he didn't glob together all those 56 grounding rods into one massive iron mass with copper plating surrounding it, and the 4 grounding rods likewise into a solid mass. He didn't melt them together. He bought them separately because of the surface area. So it's a combination of magnetism and electrostatics. And so I'd be curious what the surface area of 56 grounding rods is. But when you think about it, what was I thinking about? Oh, student. Oh, the other thing is, those grounding rods come to a point. See, what if we ask ourselves the question, well, what about sheet metal? Because you're not collecting it. You're simply storing. See, he is emitting it into the earth. Because when you have an ionic generator, you want your emitter to be a needle point. That's the most efficient way to make an ion generator. So if he truly, he's creating an electrostatic field in the dirt, and he's sending it downwards, though. That's the interesting thing. So he's interacting with the earth, and the earth is responding. So it is like Wardenclyffe. Oh my God. It's Tesla in miniature. I'll be darned. Or else he wouldn't have told us that the vertical orientation of the grounding rods is significant, and they wouldn't be grounding rods ending in a point. It's a point for a reason. So he doesn't use sheet metal. He doesn't use copper mesh screen. The shape of those objects that he planted in the soil is significant. So the shape, the fact they're copper coated probably has something to do with it as well. All these factors. Amazing. It's an amazingly complex device, even though the circuit diagram looks simple. And this is a speculative equivalent version. It's no certainty that it would actually work. Because you have to provide your own volume of dielectric. You don't have the Earth's volume anymore, and you don't have the Earth to interact with. So your efficiency level is probably going to drop because you don't have the magnet. Oh, I forgot to put in a magnet in here. That's right. I have to draw in a neomagnet that goes across the entire field of the dirt. Okay, I got to add that. Good thing I brought that up to remind me. Okay, go back to the drawing board. Okay, I put the neos on either side of the capacitor with bubble wrap in between, and then the neos are surrounded in cardboard, so I've got some spacing going on between the neo and the actual surface of the outer capacitor plate. So it's not a strong magnetic field because it's not totally close to it, but I didn't want to risk, harming the glass. So I did it this way instead of making it any stronger by allowing the magnets to come any closer to the glass plates.